Okay guys, today I'm going to show you how to do some practice pedigree problems. These are also called family trees. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to start by drawing these shapes on your key up top. So a non-shaded circle, so just draw a regular circle like that, is going to represent a normal female, meaning she does not have the trait. Just a open square like that is going to represent a normal male, meaning they do not carry the trait. Come over here next to affected female. Once you draw a circle and shade it in, that means they carry the trait that we're looking at. And then a shaded square represents an affected male, meaning they have the characteristic. Okay, so that's going to be our key as we go down the pedigree. There are a couple more things that we're going to learn later on in this chapter, but for right now, this is the basics. I'll do like 3 of these with you guys just to give you an idea of how to do them, and then you guys can do the last 3 on your own. So let's do number 1, which is a very easy one. Okay, so it says Mary married Greg. They had 2 sons, Scott and Tyler. So I'm just going to start right there. So Mary is a woman. So, by the way, some of these genders are assumed based on their name. If you want to switch around, it doesn't really matter. But Mary, I'm just going to use an M for her initial instead of writing out her full name. If you want to write out Mary, go ahead. Mary married Greg. Okay, so Mary's a circle, Greg's a square, and I connect them with a horizontal line indicating that they're married. Okay, and it says they had 2 sons and 1 daughter. So to show that they had kids, you start at the intersecting line, you draw down, and now because it's 3 kids, I'm going to make this kind of fork off 3 ways. Like so. Now she had 2 sons, so 2 squares, and 1 daughter, which is a circle. Now this is Scott, this is Tyler, and then this is Karen. Okay, so I'm just initialing them. Let me turn off the light. I'm initialing them so you guys can see who each symbol represents. Okay, and that says both of the boys are diagnosed with color blindness and nobody else in the family is colorblind. So the 2 boys are colorblind. So what that means is you are going to shade them in, indicating these 2 males have the characteristic. These other 3 people in the family tree, they are not colorblind, so you do not shade them in. Now, there are something called carriers, which I'm not going to get into right now. We'll do those later in the chapter. Someone up here had to be a carrier to pass on this recessive trait to the kids. I don't want to get into that in this problem for right now. I just want to do a simple Punnett square. Okay, I'm going to erase that. And we're going to try number 2 together. Okay, number 2 is a little bit trickier. It's just 1 generation longer. Okay, so number 2 says Elizabeth, who has Down syndrome, married Seth. So I'm just going to start there. Elizabeth married Seth. I'm going to put them there just because I ran out of room. Elizabeth married Seth. It says Elizabeth, who has Down syndrome. Okay, so the trait that we're looking at here is Down syndrome. So I'm going to shade her in. Okay, they had 1 son and 1 daughter. Okay, so I'm going to come down. They had 1 son, 1 daughter. The son is named Chris, and the daughter is named Christina. So I'm just going to put 2 C's, 1 for each. Christina was also diagnosed with Down syndrome. Okay, so I'm going to shade her in as well. Their son, Chris, married April. So Chris down here married another girl outside of the family named April. Okay. They had a son named Sutton and a daughter named Kendall. So, a son named Sutton and a daughter named Kendall. Their daughter Christina, who's over here, married Harry. Okay, they had a son Stephen and a son Graham. So 2 sons. Stephen and Graham. Okay, so that is our family tree. The other thing I forgot to do on the first one, oftentimes you're supposed to just number the generations using Roman numerals. So in this example, this would be generation 1, generation 2, generation 3, using Roman numerals. Okay, as you can see, they're very simple to draw. You just got to be able to interpret what the paragraph says. Okay, I'm going to erase this, and I'm going to do one more with you that's a little bit trickier just because it goes in a different order. Okay, I'm going to try number 4. Number 4 is trickier only because of the way it was written out. This one's actually going to work its way from the third generation up to the first generation. So when you do number 4, in fact, before you do all of them, I suggest you read the whole thing so you can tell which direction's going from the top down or from the bottom up. This one's going from the bottom up. So I'm going to start down low on here. If I were you and you guys do this one, I would start down low about here on there so you can work your way up. If you start at the top, you're going to run out of room. Okay, so it says Andy, Patty, and Derek have freckles. It doesn't tell us what their genders are, so I'm just going to call Andy a male, Patty a female, and Derek a male. If you want to switch that around, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so Andy, Patty, and Derek, they have freckles. So the trait we're looking at in this problem is freckles. Okay, so they all have freckles, so I'm going to shade them in. Okay, to show that these guys are related, they're brothers and sisters, or siblings, you connect them like that. Do not connect them with a horizontal line. That would mean they were all married, and that's a little weird. Okay, they have freckles like their father, but their mother, Mrs. Carlton, does not. So obviously these two people have a father and a mother. Okay, so it says like their father. So their father has this trait, freckles, and their mother is not. Their father and mother are obviously named Mr. and Mrs. Carlton. So I'm going to call him Mr. C and her Mrs. C. Okay, Mrs. Raymond, who is Mrs. Carlton's sister, has freckles. So Mrs. Carlton has a sister who is named Mrs. Raymond. So I'm going to put Mrs. R. Okay, again, notice I connect them like that, not a straight vertical line. That would mean they're married. So let me continue reading. So Mrs. Carlton's sister has freckles, but their parents, Mr. and Mrs. Gaskin, do not. So these two obviously have parents who are named Mr. G and Mrs. G. Okay, Mrs. Raymond's husband, Carl. So you could either call him Carl or Mr. R. I'm just going to call him Mr. R. If you want to call him Carl instead, that's fine. It's his first name. And their kids, Debbie, Darla, and Deanna, are freckled. So they have 3 kids, which, again, I'm going to assume they are females. It says they're all freckled. So Mr. Raymond and these 3 kids, who I forgot to label, D, all of them have freckles. Okay, so that one was a little bit trickier because it started in a weird spot and kind of worked its way around the family tree. But they're not that difficult once you guys get the hang of drawing them. They're going to get a little bit more complicated later in the chapter because instead of just writing their names next to them, we're going to have to kind of interpret or infer people's genotypes, which is a little bit trickier because it takes some deductive reasoning. So please try numbers 3, 5, and 6 on your own. If you have any questions, let me know.